Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the Weekly Album. Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the Weekly Album Spotlight, which I'm resuscitating after like 6 months of absence. I'm gonna try to do a video for every year, a video for every week of this year, and that includes the 2 weeks that I skipped already. So you're gonna get 3 Weekly Album Spotlights this week. So we're gonna open up the new decade with talking about an album from 2 decades ago, technically-ish. It's only 11 years, but it's technically within 2 decades. And that is the 2009 debut album by the metalcore-ish band Iwrestledabearonce. This band is some of the craziest stuff I've heard in semi-mainstream metal in a long time. And I think it's pretty telling that their career ultimately did not go anywhere, and that this is in many respects still the best album they put out. Trying to describe this band's sound is incredibly difficult. I think the way I described it to my friend was metalcore along the lines of the Dillinger Escape Plan, with genre shifts and weirdness a la Mr. Bungle, but fronted by a female vocalist who sounds like Bjork when she decides to sing clean. And that's pretty much Iwrestledabearonce, at least the first 2 albums. It is extremely wacky. And this cover art is extremely accurate. You know, this cover art is like the most 2000s thing, like late 2000s thing you can imagine. You could just add some like Advice Animals and I Has Cheeseburger Cat and like Rage Comics, and it would be that time. It would be that time in a nutshell. And maybe if you hated that time, this album isn't going to be for you, but it's definitely like the musical version of that sort of thing. People have been talking a lot about this band called, what is it like 1,000 Gex or something like that, that people have been going crazy about. And the way people have been talking about that band, talking about like they synthesize the late 2010s internet culture. This to me synthesizes like a lot of like late 2000s internet culture, but I'm getting off topic. Anyway, it is very much that LOL XD era of meme culture, sort of in musical form, but it's phenomenal. I love it. Like, you start off the album with some aggressive heavy metal, and then it just goes off. Like, there's a moment where it goes into a boogie jam for like 20 seconds, and then you get this hoarse whinny, and it segues back into like crazy metal for like 30 more seconds before the song ends. And that sort of thing is all over this album. Like, there's a track where they go into like a dancey disco moment for like 30 seconds. And there's a lot of like shifting of genre and weird stuff. And it really, really reminds me of Mr. Bungle's first album. Like, if you're familiar with Mr. Bungle's first and you love it as much as I do, I would check these guys out. They're not as good as Mr. Bungle because, I mean, it's Mike Patton. You know, nobody's as good as Mike Patton. Mike Patton's not as good as Mike Patton, you know. But they had a really developed personality of all their own that, unfortunately, they kind of discarded as their career went on. And now I think they're just defunct. Like, the replacement singer has left the band, and like their last record was 5 years ago. You know, for a band that like put out new albums every 2 years during their active career, I think they're done. I just think they're done. But let me talk about the singer. I'm blanking on what her name was, but the singer on this album is really, and on the first 2 albums, is really the star of the show to me. Like, she is what makes Iwrestledabearonce. And that's part of why I have very little interest in the band's last 2 albums. she does really, really interesting metal growls. But when she sings clean, and she sounds like Bjork with less of an accent. To the point where when I recommended this album to my buddy Lou last week because he was saying he wanted to get into metal, and I was like, I'm not much of a metalhead myself, but this band was highly impressive to me at a certain point in time. And so I said, listen to their debut, and he did. And he, about halfway through the album, he messages me and he's like, John, you said the singer left the band. Did she leave the band to become a Bjork impersonator? I said, no, I think she left the band to have a baby. And he was just like, yeah, well, she should have become a Bjork impersonator because she really sounds like Bjork on some of these tracks. Like, to the point where one of these tracks, I think it's Pazuzu for the Win, which that's a phrase I haven't heard in years, is just basically just a Bjork pastiche. Like, it's a straight up, like, you know, you got the slightly dancey electronic tracks in the background and, like, the slightly incoherent wailing, and it's just, it would not be out of place on a Bjork album. Like, I could see something like that on, like, Homogenic or Vespertine or something like that. Something else I love about this album, and that I love about their second album too, and that I think bands like this should do, and most of them that I like do, is that the songs are extremely short, and the album is extremely short. The album, I want to say, is like 30 minutes long at most, maybe 32. It is extremely short, and it's... honestly, that's for the better. Okay, so I just had to retract what I said earlier. I remembered that Black Eyed Bush is the Bjork pastiche. Pazuzu for the Win is something else. I lose track of what songs have what. Everything kind of blends together on the album. I mostly remember, oh, you know, that track that has the moment that really sounds like Bjork. That track that has the disco moment. The track with the country jam in it, you know, etc. And something else that I love about this album is these song titles. I already mentioned Pazuzu for the Win, but one of the tracks is I'm Cold and There Are Wolves After Me. Eli Cash versus the Godless Savages, and perhaps the best of them, Tastes Like Kevin Bacon. Like I said, it's pretty much that era of the internet, just in metal album form. And from what I understand, these guys were hated. Like, you go on Rate Your Music, they have, like, I think like a 2 out of 5. Like, people hated these dudes. And I have to assume it was mostly the metal elitists, because, like, one of the big reasons I do not call myself a metalhead, and that I don't really get into a huge amount of metal music. Metalheads are the most humorless people you will ever encounter. Like, I know a lot of you guys are chill. I know a lot of you guys are great. You know, Ben, who used to be on my videos, he I don't know if he isn't anymore, but I know he was a huge metalhead when he was on my videos. I think he's more into jazz these days. A lot of you guys are chill. I don't have a problem with the good metalheads, but there are a lot of just elitist types in metal, and it really gives the whole genre a bad name. But yeah, I don't care. These guys were great. You know, I thoroughly enjoyed their early stuff. You know, their first 2 albums, their EP, it's fantastic in those early days. And I've never really thought about doing a video on them, mostly because I myself found out about them through my buddy and frequent collaborator, Travis, over at Bloody Chuckle Studios. He did a first listen, I think, on one of their very underwhelming, very not good later albums, which, you know, and he described their early stuff, and it really piqued my curiosity. Although at the time, I listened to it and I was like, this is too metalcore for me, because, fun fact, I don't like metalcore. Like, I like early I Wrestled the Bear Once. I like a little bit of Dillinger Escape Plan, and some Between the Buried and Me. Not all of it, but some. Like, pretty much it's colors, and that's about it. But other than that, I don't really like metalcore. I don't get into it. So at the time I was turned off. But then I think in like 2017 or 2018, when I was still in college, I found this for like $5 in the used CD bin at the local record shop, and I was like, huh, I've never seen this in the wild. So I just picked it up, brought it back, put it on my computer, and I just fell in love with the album. I have no idea what happened to make me, you know, appreciate it more like 3 years later than in 2015, 2016, because, you know, it's, if anything, I became less of a metalhead in the last 3 years. Like, I dropped a lot of metal acts that I like. Like, I don't go out and searching for metal anymore for the most part. If I find it, I find it and I pick it up, particularly if it's a band that I like. But I don't actively go out searching for metal like I used to, because all the bands I like have just kind of disappointed me. But yeah, that was a really rambly, really drony way to end the video. Anyway, like I was saying, it's not actually the end of the video. It's coming, trust me. I didn't think I was going to do a video on this, but as I was introducing a friend to them, I just thought, I have a lot to talk about with this band, and I don't think I'll ever put them on a list. I mean, maybe if I do a top 20 albums of the 2000s, I might put this on a list, but otherwise, I don't see really ever talking about this again. So, you know, it's a decent way to fill out the roster of the Weekly Album Spotlight, and yeah, highly recommend the first two I Wrestled the Bear Once. I would avoid everything else unless you really, really like very technical, uncreative metal. Or at least that was just my impression of their later stuff. The only time I really listened to it. But yeah, anyway, I will see you guys on the next video, which will probably be coming out tomorrow.